Hello, my name is Dan Hennen. Today is April 15th, 2019. I'll be joined with guest host here tonight, Greg Fernandez Jr., on a topic we'll call Minnesota in the News today. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, Dan.
Welcome to the show. We've got a couple topics, and what I'm hoping to get today here, Greg, is we've got four main cases of news, items in the news nationwide that really have a Minnesota twist to it. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this, maybe here over an hour, maybe 15 minutes or so each on each topic, just to get a general consensus of how you are based in California. You're by the Bay Area, I believe. And
That's right.
I'd like to get your thoughts on some of these topics as well, and get some input as far as how some of these things are viewed as from others around the nation, because they all seem to be very highly volatile stories.
They're all right in your backyard.
And they're all within an hour of my home, I think. We've got all these cases coming up. And so the four cases is the story that's making the news is the child that was thrown from the third floor balcony at the Mall of America here in Bloomington. And then we've got the trial, the homicide or the death trial of Justine Damond, that it was officer accused shooting essentially Minneapolis Police Officer that's going through the second week of trial right now, that's making news. And then we've got Representative Ilhan Omar making the news almost on a weekly basis. She's the DNC House of Representatives here in Minnesota, with a very interesting background, I should say. And then we've got the recent death of Irwin Jacobs and his wife Alexandra, both 77, found dead in their home, quickly ruled a murder followed by a suicide. And that, once again, he was a former businessman and minority owner of the Minnesota Vikings, and kind of a prolific businessman here for many decades here in the Twin Cities. And now they find his body, along with his wife, both dead on the bed in their bedroom with a pistol laying in between both of them, and quickly ruled a murder-suicide. So let's start off here, I think, with the child thrown from the Mall of America. And what we've got here, here it's pretty big here, Greg. The Mall of America is in Bloomington, Minnesota. It's the largest, I guess it's the largest indoor mall in the entire nation. So it's huge. And so when they built that, it's got, four large anchor stores. It's got shopping mall, a 3-layer shopping mall, 3 levels, with a big amusement park inside that's enclosed, and huge parking, hotels, restaurants. It's the big deal. So here in Minnesota, depending on the weather, like during the wintertime, folks can shop all they want and go on rides and eat and go to the clubs, and it's 3 stories high. One of the areas that leads up in front of a glass elevator is a huge rotunda where they have events, usually at the bottom floor. There are events around the holidays, sports figures, autograph sessions, dance competitions, things like that in what's called the rotunda. And so it's a very, and the second layer has a glass railing that you can look down on, and so does the third layer. So it's three layers up, big giant rotunda. And this story that's been in the news is a 5-year-old boy was thrown over the railing, landed on the hard ground below, survived, and the person that did the throwing is a 24-year-old individual that's not related to the family at all. So that's making all the news. And so we get this strange case where this mother is shopping with her child at the 3rd floor, backs into to someone here that's close, and she says, "Sorry, excuse me, am I in your way?" He said, "No, that's fine." Proceeds to pick up the child, toss him over the edge, and flee. And so didn't know the family, didn't know anything. And so how is this being perceived as far as where you are out in the Bay Area in California? Is this also a leading story out there as well?
No, No, it's not. I think only a few people that I've talked to have even heard of this story. Maybe it is because there's so many other things going on in your backyard, unfortunately. But looking up this mall, this is also, I see what you're saying. I didn't realize the history of this mall. And this guy had some type of history there too. So he just walks up to the mother, and just says a couple things, and then grabs the son and throws the son over the third floor.
Throws the child over the third floor. And it's only 3 stories high. So at the very top level this was. So when it first came out into the news, I remember the first time I heard about this, the assumption was that it was a distraught boyfriend or the husband, or there was a dispute with the child custody case or something to that effect. That's how it first got out, because there was something about this individual that had been charged before, that with a trespassing charge, not to be in the Mall of America, not to be inside the facility. So we thought there was some kind of a restraining order, maybe a boyfriend or something. But the records show that he has been arrested in the past and had trespassing charges in the Mall of America for, I think it was destruction of property or equipment. He had stolen or found or took something there in the mall, went to that, I believe it was the same rotunda area, and threw it off the top just to see it land and crash down below 3 floors later. He was charged with that and not to come back, and that I think was a 1 or a 2 year period that he was not even to enter. And then I think he assaulted or did something with an individual there also. So that expired in, I think, 2018, and now he's back, not doing anything wrong. His probation or whatever had ended. He's back there. He did suffer and does suffer from some sort of mental incapacity or mental illness problems. Not sure what that is exactly, but his family says that he does suffer and does need help and does need to be treated. So I think it's safe to say that he likes to potentially, this is my opinion, is to watch things fall from a great distance up, just to see how they land, and it's some kind of fetish that he has, so he decided to do it with a person. Now, before I get your input here, Greg, the complaint I read just today said that he made an appearance the day before and was scoping out the area because he had intended to throw a human over, and the next day he came back after not doing that, and for some reason decided not to throw an adult, but chose a child. Now, it may have been the convenience. It may have been a small, relatively easy child just to pick up and throw, but he tossed him overboard and fled. He was then spotted and apprehended getting into the light rail train system out of the Mall of America to leave. And so now his response was that he had been talking to some girls in the mall, and they haven't treated him right. He didn't get the favorable responses he wants, and I took that as, perhaps he was maybe hitting on some girls I'm assuming he's single, and was trying to make some small talk, and that didn't go that way. So he was frustrated, angry, and got kind of violent and decided to do this. So regardless of what all happened, he is facing charges now. And if he did come the day before, that's a premeditation, and they're facing him with first-degree murder charges. Now, he's a black individual here in Minneapolis. Some have said that he's I'm not sure if he's Somali or Muslim, but that's what's thrown into the mix here right off the bat, here in our backyard, is that race angle again. Now, the boy thrown over was just a white Caucasian 5-year-old boy, and his mother watched in horror as over the board he went and had nothing and no reason to do anything. And hopefully now he'll survive, but it does not look good. What are your thoughts on something to this effect, as far as just a random thing happening?
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to really say that this is random, right? And I'm looking for any connection, but like you said, there really isn't any, which maybe this guy was just nuts or just crazy or something. The first time that I heard about this case, I remember reading that it said that a child had fallen, so it didn't even say that somebody pushed him over or anything like that. So I thought that was kind of odd too. And I think maybe that's why so many people over here didn't really pay too much attention to it. But this is a big case that we really need to look deeper in, and maybe there's people out there who have some answers, have some more clues or something, or who can help stay on top of this case, because there is something weird here, and I would be very curious to see what type of, if this guy was on any drugs, was he on any pills? I hope they drug tested him. I hope they really figure out what happened here. Well, this guy had 2 incidents in 2015 inside of this mall. He was convicted of 2 misdemeanors. He was charged with causing damage inside the stores, throwing items off of a balcony to a lower level, and resisting arrest. He was in charge in October of that same year, 2015, for throwing a glass of water and a glass of tea at a woman inside the Twin City Grill after she refused to buy him food. This guy's definitely got problems. I mean, who is hiring this person? Whoever hired him, what type of background check did they actually do? Because he worked very close in that area, right?
I believe so. And you bring up a good point, Greg. I do believe that when I first heard it too, that I heard that a boy fell, fell from a great distance, and so that didn't really pique my interest. It didn't seem out of the ordinary. It seemed fair. And then I heard that possibly someone slipped and fell. But when I heard the word throw or threw the child, that really piqued my interest, because that is a very rare thing. Now, just to give the listeners a point of view, that railing is over 4.5 feet tall. I don't think it's 5. It's probably 4.5 to 5 feet tall. It's not something that an adult or a child can slip and fall, or could fall over accidentally just by goofing around. That's a tall railing, and it's that high on purpose that, and there's no rails. You can't fall in, you can't slip through it. It's a glass panel that goes all the way around. So there's no way to slip or fall. This person was picked up physically and thrown over. And
now,
so,
how high is this glass panel?
The glass, the railing itself. Is
4 feet?
like I say, 4.5 to 5 feet, the railing, and the glass between it is just like a glass, or I'm not sure if it's a plexiglass or if it's real glass, but it's encompassing the whole area. There might be a couple inches at the bottom that are open and a couple inches at the top, but it's for sure a 3 or 4 foot high panel of glass. And so there's no way that would have happened, so he would have been physically picked up. Now, they're saying the third level on that rotunda is 39 feet high, so close to 40 feet. These are very tall. Each floor on that Mall of America it's a 10-foot ceiling, so we're talking 40 feet up from where he was thrown. So when they hear 3 stories, it doesn't seem that much, but this is 3 floors, but 40 feet is roughly equivalent to 4 stories out of for instance, a hotel or a apartment room. So he was thrown down to the bottom, and it sounds like there was nothing that precipitated this except he just grabbed this child and did it. And so the mother probably had nothing, didn't even know what hit her, and I feel bad for the whole family here. But this is getting bad because what we're hearing now locally is this race being brought into the mix. His background, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Somali or not, big contingency over in that neck of the woods for the Mall of America. For those who go there that aren't from here, the Twin Cities, around the Christmas season, it's really called almost a World of Nations or a League of Nations. It's very few Caucasian folks are there in the mall. It really draws in visitors from all over the world. Lots of Asian visitors, lots of people from Europe, lots of folks come in all over the world to visit the largest mall in the United States. And so
they've done wrestling shows there. They did the first WCW Nitro that it was held here. So that's how I know any wrestling fans, if you know, back in 1995, there's a good shot that you can see how high this really is. And this is really tragic.
Yeah, it's a large place, and so it really does draw in all sorts of visitors, and it's a very touristy. It turns into a very touristy attraction. And so, and it's been a to some extent a gang kind of a hangout here with local kids hanging out, and there's always been a large police presence there because people are allowed to hang out there.
Do we know anything about the girls that he was hitting on? Did they look like the mom of the child that he threw over?
I don't believe so. I think the two were two separate incidences. He's only 24, so I don't believe.
But do we know if the girls he were hitting on, if they were white or blonde
I do not.
hair?
I do not know. I do not know, and hopefully we can get comments, some comments below here as far as more information on this. And I know we do run a lot of conspiratorial type of topics here on the shows that I've done with you and myself, and ones that we've done here together. But this seems to be just nothing out of the ordinary, except it seems to be mental illness. But we're getting all the backlash as far as this should be a first-degree murder charge. This guy should be spending life in prison, and or should he be in a mental hospital? What should he be in a mental institution? That's some of the comments. If you read the comments on these articles, it's really going back and forth about what type of, how do you treat someone like this? And it's downright nasty. People are not very forgiving on Twitter and Facebook and social media when it comes to cases like this. Their anger and their emotional response really takes control. I think it was actually. Was it? Oh, maybe not. No, I'm not sure on that other story. I'm going to hang tight on that before I say anything. But anyway, it's an interesting case for something, and it should be interesting to follow. But yeah, it happened right here in just south of Minneapolis, in the city called Bloomington. Now, the next. Do you have anything else on that one, Greg?
Not right now. No.
Okay, if we can come back to here, because I've just got the 4 slides here. The second slide is the Republican or Representative here, Ilhan Omar, U.S. Representative, and she is representing, I think she is of a Muslim faith, and she just got elected in the House of Representatives here from Minnesota 5th District here just in January, took office January 2019. And regardless of where you are in the U.S., I'm sure you would have heard this person's name. Is that correct?
Yeah. You've heard something happened somewhere. Come on, you've heard this one.
Now, as a non-political guy, I don't really favor Republicans or Democrats. I speak, most of my broadcasts are just on basically the truth and trying to expose corruption, but she's on a Democratic side. The other one that's drawing all the criticism is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Cortez. So, she's initials are the AOC. So between these two, what I'd like to find out from you or even from listeners here on the show to leave comments below is it common or this common for someone to be newly elected and basically brought in first year, basically your freshman representatives, and this woman's 37 years old, from Somalia, from Mogadishu. For a 37-year-old, and I think AOC is only, I'm not even sure, she's 30. She's 28 years old?
Yeah, she's pretty young.
They're very young, and for these two to be making the waves that they're making, and I'm not saying they're good or bad waves, but the news, the press releases, the front page, the coverage, is it that common for freshmen in the Congress here to be making the waves that these two are making? And so what I've been hearing is, can these two really be this over the top, or are they playing a role? Have they been inserted? Are they reading from a script? Do they have handlers? Or are they authentic folks speaking their mind, and the press just likes to pick up on it because it's selling newspapers, it's in the news because it sells? Is that why they're on the front page, or because of everything they seem to do in social media, whether it's a tweet or something on social media that seems to be over the top, that grabs everyone's attention? What's your thoughts on these two, first of all, before we get to Omar, but just the two gals in general?
I would say it's very similar to our 44th president, Mr. Barack Obama. he came in there like nobody's business and just kind of flew to the top. I think he was in Congress just for one term, right? And that was it. Yeah, from 2005 to 2008. This looks like the same script. So I would follow that same script and look for the same people, the same donors, right? The same people that put these people into power. You're probably going to find that it's the same people that are operating with these two nuts. I mean, these are all just, to me, these are crazy people. Crazy people that it has to be scripted. It's like a Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
And it's made, and it's entertaining for some people. Not for me.
Yeah.
But it's entertaining. But for me, it's very frustrating because there's so many other real things going on that this has become a comedy show. This is now Comedy Central instead of it really being real news. So while these other real cases are going on, it seems like you have these people who are making these crazy statements, and they just, I don't know. To me, it all seems scripted.
Yeah, and that could very easily be, for those who followed the show and our broadcasts in the past, the Barack Obama coming out of essentially nowhere and being put into that position and role certainly was, I think that's a slam dunk that he was appointed there to run and to play a role and to be inserted into the American political establishment as far as how he was put there. He didn't have any kind of a background at all, and in fact, we don't even know truly what his background or what his name even is. These two could be something similar. They came from really obscurity into now making the headlines all the time. Now, Omar here, a Somali background makes sense because the Minneapolis location is the number one, I think, immigration location in the U.S. for Somali national folks. She's also of a Muslim faith, so she really gets things going when she starts talking about those two types of angles. And so some of the things that she says, I agree with you, Greg, that it's a form of a distraction. It's great for the coffee table or the water cooler talk at the office, or for working out at the gym or riding the bus or the subway into the office. A great chat to talk to, because these are all just great chatter. It fills people's times. The armchair politicians this is great feeding frenzy. But you're right, it's frustrating for those who are seriously about this, and they don't know if it's true or not, or what I would call organic or legitimate or not. Now she starts going after and talking and supporting the Muslims and the Muslim faith, which really drew the ire of the President Trump. Now, I'm not a fan of that, because I don't believe the Muslims had anything to do with whether it's immigration or anything. But then she starts to do this 9/11. Now, this last week, she made a comment about 9/11, and I think people took it the wrong way or the right way, but I think it served its intended purpose. She said, on 9/11, some people did some things, and it followed up the very next day with the New York Post showing that front page issue, talking about the close to 3,000 Americans that were slaughtered on 9/11. So it really brought 9/11 topic into the front page, which I liked. But it also helped.
Thank you, Omar.
It also it helped. What am I trying to say here? It helped reinforce the fact that Muslim terrorists pulled off the events of 9/11, which we know are not true. I mean, so it helps reinforce that, because they were saying that folks are saying it's your types of people that did all this on 9/11. Your folks, meaning Muslim. Your folks, meaning Middle Eastern. Your folks, meaning Arab people that pulled off 9/11. So I like that it came into the picture, because we know that there was no Muslim connection to 9/11 events at all. We know that if the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. military handled the upper-level events on 9/11, and if the Israeli Mossad, for instance, which some people are claiming, which very easily could be, was hired, the intelligence agency, the Mossad, hired to do the wiring and the explosives of the 3 World Trade Center towers that came down, we don't have a Muslim connection at all. So I'm glad she brought it up, but I'm also not, because it's such a backwards thing, because Trump then followed it up as well and got angry again. So it's interesting to see if these two are playing off each other on purpose, or if it is truly the imbeciles going back and forth and just keeping people occupied, or what I call distracted. So that's the case with her. AOC, very similar. She's in that Southern District, New York, with when you talk about 9/11, we've got the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 inquiry that has just filed that. It's just been approved for a grand jury in Southern District of New York, which is her location. That they're going to be looking at that 57 pieces of evidence that they filed. That the judge or the justice approved, that they are going to move forward with looking at the evidence to see what really happened on 9/11.
Well, that's interesting.
And that's AOC's backyard. That's her location.
She hasn't made any quotes or.
She hasn't made anything about that. So
have they reached out to her for a comment or?
I don't think there's been time because she's been in the news for everything else. But it's interesting because of all of these things going on. And so once again, the Omar case ties back to this Minnesota news just in general, that we're always in the news, and Trump is engaging with her about this, the Muslim case and the immigration bill and all these various things. But I think, number one, it's odd that everything she says is in the news, and everything that she does gets a response from the president. So is something going on here behind the scenes or not? With Trump putting on this facade. I know we've got a lot of stories out there that President Trump is involved in, some of which are true and some of which are just distraction. I feel that's my opinion, but some of this stuff is just distraction. And so it's interesting that he would engage with a freshman congressional person. He would engage with a freshman congressional AOC in New York. The question to me is, when you take a look at the much broader, big picture, why is he engaging with these two in the first place?
I just wrote that down. Why is he engaging?
Yeah, he doesn't need to be making comments and things like this.
Could it be because he's just responding to what CNN and what all of them are putting out there? I watch Fox News. I don't see a lot of that on Fox News.
Okay. Yeah, they're certainly the mainstream media is fanning the flames and gaslighting all this. I think
Now I do see it on Rush, because I listen to Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. Those two always talk about it, and I know Trump listens to their shows. Okay. They're almost just catering to whatever he wants. It's like they're never going to say that much bad. I've never heard them. I take that back. I have heard them say a few things bad about Trump, but not that much.
Yeah. So what I'm getting here, living here in the state, is that it's all divisive on the party. Republicans. It's all yes. What I notice here is that it's the Republicans can't stand her, hate her. They just can't believe what an imbecile she is. But the Democrats think she's good because she's standing up. She's standing up for herself. And she's not afraid to put up a fight. It's how she's being presented here. That she's a strong woman who's only 37 years old, and she's standing up for herself. Now, the interesting, so it's interesting because I think just the last couple of weeks was the Syria Golan Heights issue with Israel, and I think she was involved with that as well. And the thing with the Trumps is finding out is that what doesn't make the news is when he does something good for Saudi Arabia, folks from Israel hate it, but that's not in the news. When he does something good or favorable for Israel or Netanyahu or Golan Heights, the Saudis hate it because these guys are mortal enemies, but we don't hear that side of it. So he's really pitting these guys against each other, going back and forth, but we don't see that side of the story. We just see that Trump's this Zionist, he's favoring Israel, and he's a puppet to the Israel states, but he's pissing off both groups in alternating and getting these guys in the mix with all this as well. But who knows what the grander scheme of all this, what's really going on. But Omar certainly here in Minnesota is a figure that's very widely talked about, and like I said, nationwide she is as well.
Yeah, I mean, how did she get into this office? I don't understand what happened. What's going on there in your state?
Well, like I say, I'm not into the politics, but I think that 5th district was Keith Ellison, and when he vacated that spot, it became open and she won without a lot of fanfare. I don't think there was a big story. I certainly do not recall her even running. I never heard of the name.
Keith Ellison, why does that sound familiar?
And he's the other problem.
Is he the one who got busted too?
Yes.
Oh yeah, this guy got. Oh my. I mean, that it's just so corruption. It's just. This just shows these are puppets.
And so I think the other connection was to get her or someone else in there to help put away the bad stories of Keith Ellison. And so I think they're somewhat encouraged by running some of these stories because it keeps him out of the news. And so I think that the general overview here is, I think for the Minnesota listeners here to this show, is to take a look at the bigger picture of what's going on, because if we're all being played, something else certainly is going on here. But I don't know why she would be making headline news on all the comments. Now, once again, we're in an age where these folks are very active on Twitter, very active on social media, and so we're seeing this compounded with the President Trump doing the same thing, and so it just kind of spins out of control.
I have never seen a president go to Twitter. I mean, he's on Twitter probably more than half of the country, and that's great. I have no problem with him going on Twitter, because we always wanted somebody who would speak out to the people, who would bypass all of the gaga and go directly to the people. And now that we have it, a lot of people don't like it. I think it's also that it's this is setting a new standard. This is not going to get better. This is going to get worse. We're going to have more of this stuff. It might make it easier for real people to figure out who is full of crap, who isn't, or who they like and who they don't like, because now we don't have that shield. I think it's going to change the history of this country. We now have a president who has never served in anything, whatever you want to say. You know, this guy's a businessman.
Yeah.
That's what I've always wanted. I don't want to get too much off of that, but because I know that we really want to stay on topic here with this congressman, and I'm just shocked at some of the things that have happened since Trump has become our president. There's just too many things that just look staged. It's all theater, but it's theater on steroids. This is it's like a Minnesota Mania or something. I mean, there's something really, and it seems like you're right there in the heart of it. And I hope one day you can get out of Minnesota. But
it's hard to even keep up with all the things that are going on. And you're right, because I think growing up watching politicians or presidents, you knew that they had their speechwriters and whatnot, and what they were going to say or speak about was written and edited and proofed, and they went up there and did it. Here, you're getting that filter out of the way. Twitter is alive. There's no one there writing and doing this. The negative thing, I think, with Trump, or the perception of Trump, is that he probably makes 20 tweets a day, and one or two of them will be on the mainstream news. The ones that are awkward looking or strange or not spelled correctly or not using the right grammar or something, are the ones featured on the nightly news. The rest are unbelievable. And I do, whether you like the guy or not, I do recommend, if you're on Twitter, to follow him, because it certainly is entertaining, and he certainly does a lot of tweeting. But keep in mind that the one or two that don't make sense are probably the ones on the evening news that he's made fun of. The other ones are he's actually got some very insightful tweets on the other things that he's juggling at the same time.
Yeah, I think Trump definitely broke down those social media walls, right? He really broke that down. There was this big wall, and we don't have that now. Or these handlers don't have that now, I should really say.
Oh, yes.
All these people now, everybody's looking very closely at what is going to happen next. So when you hear these congressmen, like this congressman, she was, what's her name? Omar?
Ilhan Omar.
Ilhan Omar. So she is calling for Muslims to raise hell, to make people feel uncomfortable because of the discomfort that people like her have felt. She feels like she is a second-class citizen. This is crazy stuff here that we're talking about. So if we're talking about a person who, don't tell me that she's a person of peace, when she's talking about raising hell and stirring up trouble, there's a resistance. They have a resistance, and the problem is I'm not exactly sure what they are resisting.
Well, the other, I think it's twofold. One is to stand up and resist, not in the form of what we think of as terrorism or extremists, but that's what the first thing that enters our head is. But for her, it's, I think, stand up on your own 2 feet and stand up for yourself and be strong, is what she's trying to portray. But that's not coming off right, I don't think. And so it's being met with resistance from anyone else that hears it, because we've been ingrained all these years since back really since 9/11 that Muslims are bad people, and so we were never told from the beginning that there's a certain group of people in the Middle East called the Muslim Brotherhood from the Wahhabi sect that are nasty, downright corrupt individuals that use a bastardized version of the Quran. But what we've been told since 9/11 is that all Muslims are using the bad Quran. They're all bad, whether you're Sunni or Shia. It's all. So she's got a point in the fact that they're viewed as second-class citizens because of all this brainwashing that the United States press and the mainstream media has gotten away with for all these years. They do feel like second-hand citizens or second-class citizens.
Well, join the club.
So
join the club. There's many people here that feel that same way.
Exactly.
You
so
know,
it's got.
It has nothing to do with her. It has nothing to do with any Muslims. It's the same person that said that terror was founded after 9/11. Terror's been around for a long time, and it is not just about Muslims. It's not just about one group or you know, it's bigger, it's deeper. I just sometimes I don't know what she's talking. I think she's just pandering to a certain crowd, trying to stir up people, and that's not the right way to help this country move forward. To help this country go forward, you want to find out what really happened there, but you don't want to make people. You don't want to raise hell. That's not a good thing.
Yeah,
you know, any congressman that is saying that, man, that's a big red flag.
Yep, and it's true. And then the other thing with her comment on 9/11, where she said some people did some things. Now, a lot of people, I should say, took that in many different ways. Some majority were saying she was belittling the events on 9/11 because, oh well, some people did some things. I heard it the first time I heard her say that was some people did some things, leads me to open the door to saying, who are some people and what things did they do? Is that what she was really getting at? Was she trying to open the door for a new 9/11 investigation by saying it wasn't the people that we thought doing the things that we thought on 9/11 from what we've been told on 9/11? You know, was that some kind of subliminal Easter egg message in there as far as what we should be looking into by making a general comment like that? What are your thoughts on what she meant by that comment?
Yeah, I had to go back because I had to make sure that I watched it. And people should not just listen to that quote or see that quote. You got to see it in the proper context of it, right? So she's really talking about all of these things, raising hell, blah blah blah. And it sounds like she's saying that the Muslims did not pull off September 11th, which it is definitely true, because even if the 19 hijackers did it, and I don't believe that they did, and it's hard pressed to find anybody who really does that isn't getting paid to say that they did. Even if they did, they're not Muslims then, because that's not what a Muslim would do. A Muslim is not supposed to kill innocent people. They're not supposed to do all of these things. These are very simple things, very basic things. So I think she brings up a really good point when you talk about I don't think she's saying some people did some things like, oh, whatever. You know, I think she's implying that 9/11 it goes deeper. That this might have been staged. Now I could be wrong, and I also think that whoever put her into this spot here, who put her into power, she probably got pushback on it because they don't want them talking about that stuff. I do, and you do, and many of the people of this country, the whole world do. So that's always a good thing. Whenever anybody is questioning 911, I mean, I gotta say that is a good thing, and it sounds like she does not believe the official story of September 11th.
And that's very good if that's the case. If you believe that as your interpretation, and so did I, maybe there's others out there who believe the same thing, because I think that she was hinting at something much more deeper about 9/11 rather than just coming off that way as if it was kind of nonchalant, is how I took that the general public took it, and that's why they were offended, because, oh well, some people did some things. She was hinting at, you got to, before you start blaming who did what, you better understand who really were those people and what really did they do, because it wasn't as we were told. The other thing she does that really likes some locals here in Minnesota is that she's standing up for and putting down the Israeli and Israel, the Zionist Israel. And so she's standing up and saying things like that, which is very good, because we don't hear that at all. And that's, from what I've been heard, what I understand is that when you become a senator or a House of Representatives, one of your first tours in Washington, D.C. is to go through, you get your sit-down talk about who never to offend and what never to say about a certain country, and that country is Israel. And so either she didn't get that talking to, or she didn't buy it, and she's very outspoken against that, which means if she does have a handler, I'll say that, that person is not very happy with some of these statements she's making, because she's outright going against Israel, which you never see in the mainstream. And I applaud that.
Definitely.
But yeah, if she's put into play there, and what we're talking about with, I think, Greg, if you agree or not, I want to bounce this off of you, but when we go back to the Obama administration, and when we talk about people having handlers and being put into certain positions of authority, his handler there was essentially, was it Valerie Jarrett? Was the handler for Barack Obama, and who he was there working with on the Democratic side. Actually, a handler for Hillary was really Huma Abedin. And so you get Abedin, who was a handler, and Valerie Jarrett, who's really controlling Obama's movements while he was in office, are really two handlers. And now we get some folks like this that are have almost a similar feel to them, as far as in charge of something does not seem authentic, is what it seems like here. What are your thoughts? Do you agree on that, Huma Abedin and Valerie Jarrett, or do you have any other comments on that?
I think they're part of it. I think it goes higher, and I think you also think that it goes higher too. It's not that we're not saying that because they're the ones who are actually handling these people day to day that they're the top of the food chain or anything.
Oh, correct. Sorry.
But I do agree. Yeah, they are the ones who are kind of who have got them there, who have got them to this spot. Of course, there's many people that we never hear of, and those are the ones that are really dangerous. Are the ones that we never hear of in the public, or the ones that try to stay out of the public. Those are the more dangerous ones. But these ones are kind of put up there, and so that way, if anything happens, these handlers can actually take the fall. The public handlers, I guess we should call them.
Yes, that's a very good way to say that. I do not mean to say that they're the top of the spectrum, but it's to try to put into perspective the puppets and the puppeteers and who's in charge of who, from a handling perspective, because you're right, even if Valerie Jarrett is handling Barack Obama or Barry Soetoro, who's handling Valerie Jarrett is the question, and or who are the multiple people above her is what I'm hoping for broadcasts like this to get out, to get the viewers to think of the next level. Ilhan Omar here does seem to be controlled at some level, much higher than what she is doing. And that's not to say that what she's doing is good or bad or right or wrong. It's just the fact is, more than likely, she's controlled or handled in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and she makes it sound that Trump hates her culture or hates the Muslims. I don't buy that. I really don't buy that. I kind of think Trump as a businessman. This is somebody who I don't know Trump or anything. I'm just guessing about this, but I just don't see that, and I don't look at, all I look at what he does, what his policies are, and a lot of the things that she says, I'm like, I don't see that, but I remember this same script. This is a George Bush script. This is the same stuff that I was told back in 2001 about George Bush. All the stuff that I'm hearing about Trump is the same script that I heard about George Bush. George Bush is this, George Bush is that. And now I'm going back and I'm like, well, maybe I should research George Bush a little more. But I mean, there's still way too many bad things about Bush. But you can see the patterns. And when it's a pattern, it's probably a program. And when it's a program, somebody created that program. And then it just goes up and up and up. And so I never get caught on, Trump is good, Trump is bad, or this person is good, that person is bad, or they're part of this group, or they're part of that group. We can only look at what they do. And when a person is in Congress, or a person is our president, it's very important to judge them by what they do, not necessarily by what they say, because Trump is like a master troll. It's like he's the greatest troll that I've ever seen. And I think sometimes he prods people. He'll put things out there to see how they react, like this whole sanctuary city thing. I think is like it got this huge rise out of people when Trump was talking about putting people into these sanctuary cities, and there was a lot of pushback on it. And even though Trump didn't I don't think he signed anything into office or anything. He didn't put anything down on paper, but it just shows the power that Trump has as a president on social media, that everybody's watching, everybody's listening, everybody's waiting to see what he's going to do next. It's like a movie that never ends. It's like a saga, chapter after chapter, and you just want to kick back and watch what happens next. But you have to remember, this is real life. This is not a movie. This is not a script. These are real people. And the stuff that we're talking about here, this is a dangerous time.
Yeah, very, very a good phrase, dangerous time. It's a very interesting time we're living in here. I think also very historic.
Yes.
But every day it's something new, and it's just too much. And then, I think the way the media is so used to being able to spin things, and now they're losing that control because they're on the outside looking in, and the story or the topic or the article or whatever the topic is has already been spun in social media before mainstream media has a chance to get at it. And so they're kind of sometimes being reactionary on how to spin something. Now, speaking of spinning, have you heard the Officer Noor story, Greg, over there in California?
Yeah, I've been following that a little bit here, and I'm hoping you can kind of.
Yeah, I'll give a quick synopsis here. This is
Can you I just wanted to make sure that you brought up the Donald Trump Jr. quote.
I had it up on another screen, but I've since minimized it. Can you read that? Okay. Read that off before we go to the next topic.
Yeah, let me see that. I just want to read that for people here. Okay, Donald Trump Jr. on April 14, 2019, posted, "We've reached a sad point where Speaker Nancy Pelosi is so terrified of offending our new bosses, Omar, AOC, and Tlaib, that those three could submit a resolution deeming 9/11 an inside job, and I'm confident that 95% of the House Democrats would still be too afraid to cross them. They run the Dem Party now." So he's saying they could do everything right. He said 9/11 an inside job, and it's another cryptic thing. Is this theater? Is this scripted? What are we seeing here?
Well, the strange thing is that Donald Trump Jr. also, he's another one that I would consider following if I was on Twitter. If I were you, for the listeners, a good recommendation. He puts out some very interesting things as well. And this quote and comment there relating to 9/11 being an inside job, to me, maybe that confirms the fact that Ilhan Omar's comment was directed at that and did mean something more subliminal versus just a nonchalant, off-the-cuff comment that how it was portrayed in the media.
Right. This is within a week or so between the two quotes, I think.
So he did say that, okay. And maybe these guys are there to help stir something up, because Pelosi as a bad guy here in the States. I don't see any scenario where she's good at all.
No.
In anything she's doing. Her along with Chucky Schumer are the bad guys.
She is the one who took impeachment off of the table when the Dems controlled the House and could have impeached George W. Bush for his war crimes, for all that stuff, and she said it's off of the table. That to me told me right then everything that I needed to know about that party.
Yeah, we're really getting down to the corruption, how bad it is there on the Democratic side, especially now with Pelosi and Schumer and all these folks, Adam Schiff and all these, I don't want to say degenerates, but they're scraping the barrel as far as what we've got out there, and it's pretty nasty stuff. So hopefully, if she did imply 9/11 and it didn't get portrayed that way, Donald Trump Jr.'s tweet could have been pushing the envelope there as far as what she meant by that, because that's getting closer to the forefront, and that could blow the top off a lot of things as far as what happened way back in 2001. Now, Officer Noor. Now, what we get here, largest in the Minneapolis, back to the Minneapolis topic, largest contingent of Somali folks here is in the Twin Cities. And so what they did here, Greg, I'll give a little background on this case, is try to have a program in place to give folks with Somali background second chances, additional chances, career chances. And in the police department, they had a program to start hiring Somali background individuals into the Minneapolis Police Department that just started, I think it was 5 years ago. Brand new program. In fact,
for citizens or
no, for law enforcement people with law enforcement backgrounds, but they're trying to hire folks that have a Somali background so they could, number one, integrate in with a lot of the calls that they get to be able to respond, and also to kind of give it a good, kind of a feel good is, we're hiring, different types of backgrounds. I believe that this Officer Noor, who's facing these charges now, I think he was the first hire when that program first started. They went out of their way to hire him. And there was a press release and a news conference saying we finally hired a first Somali police officer. This was a couple years ago.
That's racism to me. Hiring somebody because of their skin color, or because of where they're from, that's wrong.
And so that's
hire somebody because of their merits.
That correct. So that is what caused a lot of uprising here in the Twin Cities back when that first happened, because half the people said the same thing you just said. Why are we having programs like this? And the other half says, oh, we're trying to expand and trying to grow and be more divergent and affirmative action kind of a thing. So they're looking at it from that standpoint. So they paraded him around and had a press conference saying this is the first of the Somali, such a large contingent here of Somali population. He's an actual police officer. He's the very one now that is facing charges of shooting an unarmed civilian in an alleyway a couple of years ago in July. Now what we get here, this woman who was about to be married was a 40-year-old Australian white woman. So talk about placing the mainstream media into a quandary. How do you spin a case like this? And I've got a friend who's a former retired police officer who says most of the things that you see on the news, they'll try to be spun by the media somehow and try to favor it one way or spin it a certain way and make one group look like the good group or one group look like the bad group. He says what you have here in this particular case, you don't have that. You don't have a win-win or a win-lose situation. It's kind of a lose-lose. So, following this case, which I've followed here from the beginning, you get a woman who makes a 911 phone call one night. Behind her home, she hears screaming and yelling and the phrase "no, no, no" several times coming from the alley. She thinks it's a sexual assault or potentially a rape. She does her good deed of calling 911, and then a few minutes later when they don't show, she calls again, and the dispatch says we're on our way. Well, these two individuals show up. Officer Noor here, the Somali police officer, is in the passenger side of the squad car. And the driver is a white Caucasian officer, Harity, I think his name is. They're driving down the alley, don't see anything, windows are down, they don't hear anything, and their lights are out. And so they keep rolling past where she lives, and they go 5 houses down, come to a stop sign, and next thing you know, she appears. Justine Damond appears, not the woman who needs help. Justine Damond is in pajamas and barefoot. This was 10:30, 11:30 or something at night. It was late at night. And so what we hear is the officers are startled. Officer Noor on the passenger side takes his gun out of his holster, fires, aims, shoots, and hits her in the abdomen, firing across, I repeat, across the driver's side, whose officers driving the vehicle almost got shot. Right in front of his face, the shot was fired and shooting down the person, hitting her in the gut. Now, Minneapolis police departments have a body cam. They're wearing body cams, and they should activate the body cams. It's not a hard rule, but they should activate it once their weapons are pulled out or once they arrive at a scene. The body cams should be engaged. So both of them have them on their chest. Neither of them turn on their body cams. A woman gets shot. She proceeds to die, and now the city's in an uproar over what the hell happened. And so we think that he fired. At first, the public thinks that he must have been scared, nervous, young. Both officers, I think, were less than 3 years on the job. Noor was first or second year. I think both of them were 2 or less years on the job. So they thought they were startled. They thought they were alarmed, and driving down that alleyway, potentially he may have had that gun out and on his lap going down that alleyway. Not knowing what would happen. So that was one of the theories, and one of the stories were heard that he may have had it out the entire time. The other story is that, which didn't come about till 3 days later. 3 days later after this happened, they said, you know what, the driver and the passenger, now both of the officers say, you know what, we were startled because we heard a sound. We heard a noise. We heard a slap on the window. We heard a bang on the back of the squad car. We think that when Justine Damond was running from her house in the alleyway to get caught up to us, to alert us, she banged down the window. And it startled us enough that we got out our gun and shot. Well, just today, if you read the article, just today in the testimony, this trial is going on in real time here in the Twin Cities. The police chief testified on the witness stand that he knew nothing about anyone hitting or slamming the window or the glass or the back of the police cruiser. He said, I think that story was made up several days after this all happened as a nice, easy way to get out of this. So, during the investigation, folks doing the investigation on not the shooting, but what really happened in the alleyway, took the fingerprints of the back of the car, took the fingerprints of the back of the window, found no fingerprints or a handprint of anyone slapping or hitting the back of that squad car at all. So right now it puts into play the fact that that story or that allegation was simply made up to say now we have a reasonable doubt to have our guns out because we were alarmed, we were nervous, we made this in a knee-jerk reaction. This shooting took place in a knee-jerk reaction because of something that the victim did. The victim ran up behind us after we drove past her house. We were about to leave through the alleyway onto the next street. To get our attention, she came up and slapped the back of the vehicle. Well, now we know that is false, that is fake, that was a hoax. Nothing of that sort took place. So the question is, why did the officer, both of them now, not the shooter, both of them said we were startled and we're jumpy because of someone slapped the back of the police cruiser to get our attention. We thought we were, quote, being set up for an ambush. Now, the other thing that I'd like your input here on from yours in California, Greg, is although this took place in Minneapolis, and there are shootings, there are killings, there are homicides, but there are also good neighborhoods in Minneapolis and bad neighborhoods. There are certain neighborhoods that most of the calls come from. And there are certain neighborhoods, like this one in particular, in Minneapolis, that's actually upscale, high-end, very low crime. And so they keep trying to say that they were startled, they think they were fearing an ambush, they were set up to be attacked, is what they thought. And so that's not going over too easy now, because this is a neighborhood where a lot of calls do not come in. A lot of homicides and murders do not come into this neighborhood. This is the Fulton neighborhood of Minneapolis. Very nice professional folks here with educated backgrounds. And so that's why I think some of these reasons are not being played out correctly, because we see a thin blue line of cover-up here that's going on that was captured here in the aftermath. Now, sorry, I want to jump in one more thing before you say.
Sure.
You know, I mentioned they didn't turn on they didn't activate their body cameras, which they should have if one or both of their weapons were out, meaning both officers. If their weapon was out, which they should have been, driving down an alleyway, neither of the weapons should be out. Your weapon should be used only in a case of self-defense when you feel that your life is in danger. Anything less than that, you have pepper spray, you've got mace, you've got all sorts of varieties of things to use. But the weapon only comes out if your life is in danger. So they activate the body cam. This also just came out yesterday in the trial. Their body cams were activated. But guess when? After the shooting took place, during resuscitation efforts of the victim, they both decided to turn on their body cams. So all the jurors get to see when the body cams are turned on is these two individuals performing life-saving efforts on this poor woman in a nice showing of goodwill, doing the best that they can. Well, one of the audio gets picked up by saying, "What I recommend to you," and another officer who gets there says, "I would keep your mouth shut and I would stay away from people," he told Mr. Newer. "Don't say a word. I would not speak up, and I'd keep your mouth shut if I were you about this entire case." Now that part gets captured in audio.
Good.
Basically telling him to keep his mouth shut and stay away from people and don't talk about what just happened here. That's picked up and that's played to the jury. So now we've got another instance of a potential blue wall of silence that's going on here in a case like this, where it should be just a slam dunk case. Slam dunk. No reason for the gun to be out. Why was it out? Why did a shot take place? Why did someone have to die in the first place? Now, her wedding was coincidentally the next month, so she was now engaged. Her fiance was giving testimony, I think, the first day of all this. And so what we're hearing now is heart-wrenching testimony from the family and the police chief today, other witnesses, and other individuals here over the last couple days. It should be wrapping up here this week, I'm guessing. But there was no thump on the back of the squad car, no slapping of the back of the window or the police cruiser. That's what we've been told since day one, is that their reaction to that thump is what caused them both, or one, to get their weapon out and to fire, and to make firing from inside a squad car, which I can't believe. The driver must have been more surprised than anyone else to have a gun fired right in front of his face at the unsuspecting victim.
I've never heard. Have you ever heard of that?
Never.
Ever.
Never in my life have I heard of anything such a case like this.
I'd be curious if there's any officers out there listening, past, present, and future. You ever heard of anything like this? I've never heard of this. That's why when you first said that, wait a minute, because I thought Noor was the driver, but when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, he's not the driver. Wait, what?
Yeah, he was the young officer just in the police cruiser as in the passenger seat, and the driver was Harity, who was driving. And Harity stopped, put the car into park, and someone came up. They were about to talk to her about whatever the case was going on here, and for some reason, Mr. Noor had his gun unholstered, and in a split second decided to shoot through the open window at Justine Damond. The window was not even up. The window was down. He shot right through in front of the face of his partner. And so I thought, I had in good hopes at the very beginning of this, thinking we finally have a case here where we could get one of these officers turn on the other one by, this Harity could have been the good guy by saying, I don't know what he was thinking about Noor. I never would have approved of such action, and I don't know what he was thinking. And I hope he does get, I would hope that he would testify against Noor in the court case, not stand up for him. And much of all things is to help make up and aid and abet in a story, a story that was made up to help go along with this official narrative. That was a lie. He's doing it. He's saying that they both heard a thump. They both were startled, and in fact, Harity, the driver, I think the testimony that I read in the complaint was that he also potentially had his gun out on his waist driving through that alleyway, on his lap, because he was so nervous. They both quote feared for their lives.
But does he say that? Does the driver say a couple things? Okay, where did the shell from the bullet land? Right, it must have landed on the driver's lap or something like that, or maybe not. But the other thing is the noise, the sound. Did they mention anything about their hearing after this loud shot just crossed his face, basically?
Yeah, they of course say how loud it was, but I think that if you're going to have suffer hearing loss from this driver, from that loud gunshot from inside from a pistol several inches away from your face that took place, I would be more disturbed if I was the driver about the potential for hearing loss down the road or his eardrums breaking. I mean, this was nothing was mentioned. No, they were both quiet, and none of them said a word. And I think it was 3 days later, after the shooting took place in July of 2017, that both of these individuals. Well, it was Harity that came out because Officer Noor hasn't yet to this day spoken to the public outside of a court setting. He hasn't mentioned a word. He hasn't even agreed to do an interview with his own police department, explaining what happened.
But has he explained it to anybody?
Nope,
Privately?
Just the other driver says that we heard a thump, and that story came out 3 days later, that someone startled them by slapping the back of the squad car, which we know now is not even true.
And it wouldn't even make sense, yeah.
No, so we know that the driver, who is Harity, is already agreeing and going along with the story that they concocted between both of them.
Now,
that's now being exposed in the trial. So he could be facing something.
Yeah, and he might be too deep in now to kind of start telling the truth, but they might get him to sing. It sounds like I've looked at some of the stuff that's going on, and it sounds like somebody's going to end up singing. I hope. Do we know what type of gun? And do we know if you were to fire the gun from the passenger side, how would the driver's hearing be affected in a physical way, where they could actually tell that he suffered some hearing loss or he had some hearing problems? Like you said, it's weird that they're not saying that there was no both of them something. I guess I don't know.
Well, it would have been loud, and that may have been mentioned in the details, but I don't know the exact size or the model of the weapon itself, the service weapon that he had,
I'd be curious about
or
that.
where the shell landed. The casing landed, or if there was any hearing loss. Now, I know in that first couple of seconds, I'm guessing that it would have been hard to hear anything after the echo going through, of the echo of the shot being fired.
And there was one shot fired?
Just one shot, and so he fired right across the window, through the open window, hit her in the abdomen. She was alive. They were performing CPR, and she was still breathing at that one point. But in the background, you can just hear when the body cameras were turned on, at this point, during the life-saving efforts, that they must have come to their senses to say, hey, turn it on so we don't get into trouble.
Do we know if the window was closed, and then the driver rolled it down?
I believe, and this is just my assumption, is that the window was up, and then as they went through that alleyway, they had it down with the lights off, rolling through that alley, looking for hearing some activity for a potential rape or a sexual assault. So I think both of their front windows were actually rolled down by the time they got to that alleyway.
Okay. And then.
Now, if she was running or walking, she was barefoot, so they wouldn't have heard her coming. Anyway, so I would guess that they were startled, is what my guess would be, that he honestly was startled when she appeared.
Was she still on with 911, or she?
Nope, she hung up. She hung up and said, police are here, because she was online with her husband or her fiancé at the time, saying, they're not here yet, I'm going to go check again because maybe they got backed up and maybe they got the wrong route or they were assisting other officers. And she called back. 911 dispatch records show that she approved that she made a second phone call. And then once she saw the lights or the squad car, she hung up with her husband, and her last words to him, the fiancé, was, okay, police are here now, and she hung up. That was...
And she was where?
And she was in the house, I think, heading out to the alleyway at that point.
And he was, I'm sorry, and he was out of state or...
I'm sorry, out of state. He was out traveling on business and was out of town. She was at the house by herself that weekend.
Okay, I want to come back to him. And his son. But first, when they found her body, did they find her cell phone next to her body? Was it on the ground somewhere?
Good question. I don't know if it was in her pocket, because I think she either had it in her hand or she had it in her pocket when she was running down the alleyway to get to the end. And like I said, it's 4 or 5 houses. She's in the middle of the block. I think there's 12 to 14 houses on that block. She lives right in the center, right in the middle. So her alleyway is, I think there's 7 houses to the left and to the right when she looks out her back window. She was shot and killed at the very end of the street, right next to the street. So she had to walk 5 or 6 houses down. So I'm not sure where her cell phone was at the time, but it was off. It wasn't connected.
I'd be very curious to know if the cell phone was found on the ground or if it was found in her pocket, because the question for this Noor, I guess, did this Noor have bad, how was his eyesight? Is it possible that he thought that he saw a gun, but it was a cell phone?
Oh, I see.
Is that possible?
It could have been, but I think she appeared there all at one time in a split second. Right as she appeared, the shot took place, and it all happened so fast. I don't think they weren't there talking or conversing with her when the shot went off.
Yeah, I mean,
she just showed up. So it could have been.
She did have a cell phone, and
he could have used that as a defense. He could have even used that for a defense. Correct.
Yeah, but even then, he's going to have a hard. He should have a hard time. Showing that there's no justification. I don't see any justification for this so far. The fact that he isn't talking is also strange. It's like you would want to get your story out there. I understand they're telling him not to talk and everything, but I mean, usually they're at least speaking with somebody. It sounds like they didn't even speak with the chief. Is
nope,
that right?
Nope. And so they didn't. They couldn't even fire him while the investigation was going on.
So
he was placed on administrative leave the very next day.
Do we know anything about him before he came on to this police force? Because this looks like another trophy person that was kind of put into this spot, and I'd be curious to know the background of who helped him get there. Somebody at the very top probably just wants this, doesn't want this to get out there, because whoever created this program, and can you tell me the name of that program again?
I don't know the name, but it was for Somali nationals living in the state to apply for and get a job there.
People should look further into that program. Who created it? What their stance are? They should be the first people coming out against this. Obviously, they're going to be the last people because it's going to make them look bad. What type of funds are they getting? What type of money is changing hands there? I'd be very, very curious to see. It just sounds like everybody at this point is trying to CYA.
That's exactly the case. They're not, Yeah, they're all CYA. Everyone is.
Yeah, which doesn't make them guilty of anything, but covering up. Whether they're covering up, their involvement in it or just anything, they're covering up something. That's
yeah. And then the sad thing is we don't get the truth. All the public wants to know is really the truth. We're not trying to find out.
We don't know what happened. I mean, I've read all of these things. I remember watching your video back in 2017, and it's like, wait a minute. We don't even know what really happened here.
Nope.
All that we have is two cops who stayed in the car, like a drive-by shooting against a white woman. I mean, this is odd.
Yeah, you would think
really
perfect perfect situation. You'd have the officer, the driver of this squad car, come forward the next day with some sort of press release and say what happened, what truly happened, regardless of who's getting in trouble, just to get the truth out there.
Yeah, unless he's already compromised.
Well, see, that's the question. He hasn't said anything himself either, except a couple small things. And now his story, the problem is with him, his story waited 3 days to come out, and it aligns up perfectly with Noor's, and both of the stories don't line up to what the chief says, or to what the neighbors or the witnesses didn't see anything like this going on. So they're already, they're trying to come up with a cover story to reduce the amount of blowback.
I found a short story on the Sydney Morning Herald that talks about a witness. A witness comes forward, says part of the encounter was filmed. Have you looked into that? Have you read that? It's a very short article, really not much there. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
Was this from the
Sydney Morning Herald?
Was this about the bicyclist?
Yes.
Okay.
What's the bicycle? What's the scoop on?
Well, it may not be the same thing as what you're talking about. What the very first thing when this whole thing went down, there was a bicyclist riding by who witnessed either the entire encounter or just the back end of the encounter, and they wanted to get his story straight. But this came right on the heels of another officer-involved shooting, I think, in another state. And so this person wanted to stay low profile and get an attorney before he said anything because of any potential blowback. But I don't think there was any video. What they said for this particular case was body cam footage will be shown to the jurors at the trial. But so many people thought, well, this would be nice to finally get the truth up because they'll show the body cam footage from the officers. And so a couple of people I talked to says, well, it looks like they did have body cam. And I said, well, remember when the case first came out, the first FOIA requests that came out after this case was to get the full video, audio cam from the body cam of both officers. Now, the police chief, the Minneapolis police chief at the time says he made a very strange crafted question by saying body cam footage is not available. He never said that they didn't have it on, they didn't have it off, they didn't capture anything. He just says it's not available. And I thought that was strange. So they had it off, and then what they did was turn it on later. So what made the news last week was the jury now is going to be seeing some of the body camera footage. But what that meant was the aftermath, just the footage of them having their cameras on in the aftermath of the shooting, which I don't think shows anything except for what they were talking about and what they were doing. And it shows them in a very good light, performing CPR and life-saving efforts, and also in a bad light, a fellow officer telling them both to, telling Noor to keep his mouth shut and don't talk to anyone. And I would shut your mouth.
One of the things that I read today, I think it's from the Star Trib, and I think that's where they say, some cameras were shut off after police showed up at the scene. So there's these other officers who were there at the scene why are they turning their cameras off?
Oh, that was a question. Let me, I'm going to grab a glass of water. I'll be right back.
Sure. And the Assistant Hennepin County Attorney Amy Sweezy asked the acting chief, the camera should have been turned on.
So what they say is that the rule is that when you pull over at a scene or a site, or dealing with the general public, or if your weapon is unholstered, that body camera needs to be on.
Right, and it sounds like
it wasn't. And then a couple of the individuals who showed up later had theirs on and quickly turned them off.
That's so weird.
So we get a series of people turning their cameras on and off at the scene, all doing it wrong.
Is this a big department, small department?
Minneapolis Police is the largest in the state.
Oh my suspicious ones are the more questionable ones, I guess. But that does not make sense to me.
Well, this came on the heels of the Jamal Clark story and the other officers. There's been 2 officer-involved shootings the last couple of years in the same Minneapolis Police Department, different precinct, but a lot of unfortunate events. So this was coming on the heels of all these stories.
Yeah, just going back to the witness, this is from the article from the Sydney Morning Herald. It's dated July 23rd, 2017. And it says that a witness who was nearby has been located and is cooperating. State investigators say the witness who was seen bicycling in the area immediately before the shooting and was stopped and watched officers perform CPR has been cooperative and provided an interview today, according to the BCA. And it says a source with direct knowledge of the investigation said the witness filmed part of the encounter. I see what you're saying. So the encounter is not the shooting. The encounter is the officers giving CPR to this woman.
Well, the body cam. So there was 2 videos footage. Then one was the body cam of 1 or 2 of the officers. I think both of them turned them on after the shooting. Both Harity and Nora turned theirs on, and the other gentleman or 2 that came in afterwards also had theirs on. But this bicyclist must have stopped and filmed from his smartphone, I'm assuming, part of the aftermath as well. And that's different than the body cam footage.
Gotcha.
But there's no video that shows actually what happened. And that in that area, too, you would think that there would be a surveillance either on a house or a garage or on the intersection or something that would have pictured or captured it. But quickly when they looked at that was not the case. So they had no... So it's all he said, she said, essentially is what it is. And so this witness had very compelling testimony, I think. And that was what caused this person, I believe it's a male, to say, I don't want to talk yet too soon because 2 officers' word against mine, it's not going to go over too well, even if I am right.
So it might have been it's something contradictory to what the officers are saying. Basically, he's giving a different story, so it sounds like.
It could have been, but if he's bicycling by, he wouldn't have heard that thump, even if it did take place, or the slap on the back of the window.
But he might have heard them covering or trying to cover it up, or trying to say, hey, don't talk about this, or maybe he heard what one officer talking to the other officer. He probably heard what happened when the cameras were turned off, is what it sounds like.
Oh, okay. That could be. And he was probably, several feet away, or, he could have been 20, 30 feet away at this point.
And he was examined, he was talked to for 4 hours, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, when this all went down, he was very interested to see what his background, what he all saw, because I don't think it jived with what really happened, and I think he was giving the true testimony of what really happened, and I think
he was
giving...
interviewed by the officer who drove the car for 4 hours.
Harity?
Yeah, he was interviewed by him.
So that I would think that's very suspicious if that's the case, because this Harity should have nothing to do with, and that may have been why the bicyclist went into hiding and didn't say anything. He didn't want his name even out there.
Okay, I see. Wow, that is weird.
So if that's the case, if Harity did the interviewing of the bicyclist,
a 4-hour interview.
Well, I bet that was very.
Let me see. Let me make sure.
That was probably more of an interrogation, is my guess.
Okay, here's the sentence, just in case I'm misinterpreting this. The BCA made a plea for the witness to come forward on Tuesday after revealing preliminary evidence based on a 4-hour interview with Officer Matthew Harity. Okay, so the 4-hour interview was with Matthew Harity and the BCA.
Oh, I see.
Harity and the bicyclist.
Okay.
All right, just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah, Harity's really the one holding all the stakes here, and if he wants to stay in good graces, he'll cooperate with stuff, and if he wants the truth to get out, he probably won't be sitting too well with his career. And a lot of these guys, they're going to be thinking of their careers and not wanting to rock the boat, even though nothing was here that I think there was nothing to do with any kind of a conspiracy or conspiratorial angle.
Yeah.
It was just a tragedy that took place. But then what we get here is essentially a cover-up that really didn't need to take place. And so you get people kind of busted now in a cover-up to some extent.
So this case is still ongoing, right?
Yeah, we should find out. It should be ending here this week. Today is Monday, so okay. I think this week it'll come to a conclusion. And what they did was they charged this Officer Knorr with, I think, a third-degree homicide or negligent death, a second-degree homicide, second, third, and negligence or something. I think there was 3 charges total, and so he'll probably be found guilty of one of them, probably not all 3. And it certainly wasn't. I think it was accidental. It wasn't premeditated, obviously, so it wouldn't be first degree. But the question was, now to a normal person, they'd be facing a second degree murder charge because he was an officer. They're saying, did he act within reason? Did he use reasonable force or reasonable reaction in his role as an officer? If it was within reason, then this is okay. Then it was just a tragic accident. And so what the public wants is him to go to jail for something, go to prison for something, not get a slap on the wrist and not get a fine, but go to prison for something. If they get him off on this, now he's already been since fired. But he was for many, many months, he was on paid administrative leave without saying a word. I mean, his own department wanted to interview him, and he said, "No thanks, not interested." He didn't speak a single word.
But this other officer did. So everything that Knorr says to anyone should be the same story as what the officer who was driving the car, Officer Matthew Harity, their story should line up.
Yep.
And maybe that's why this Knorr has not come forward so far until they hear whatever. Yeah,
that could be the case too. It's just to ensure that the stories don't get mixed up. He doesn't say anything, and it lessens the chance of any mix-up.
Yeah, the only other question that I had on this one is I watched a short video with the son, Zach, and I don't know, that was interesting. What I wanted to know is I've seen press conferences with her father, with the victim's father.
Yes.
What about this Don Damond? Has he said anything? Do we have any public videos of him? Yes. Yeah,
there's some information out there. He travels for work. He had finally met, I think, her, and it was all perfect, and they were engaged, and the wedding was supposed to be the very next month, and he had a son from a prior marriage, and I think, I'm not sure, this may have been a second marriage for her too, but these two, she was a life coach or something to that effect, and super nice. Everyone just loved her. So it was a tough case all around because you had no one really to point the finger at. You can't really point the finger at. We know the officer made a bad choice, but that was a split-second thing. The question really from the police department, it was what they want to get at, I believe, is why was the gun or guns out? Why was the weapons unholstered? And if they were unholstered, why weren't those body cameras activated? If they were activated, all this would have been nonsense. We wouldn't be here because all they got to do is turn the thing on.
If you have your gun out, the camera should be on, pretty much.
That's the general rule.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. But are there any public comments from the fiance?
Yes, you can do some searches out there. Nothing that I found big or alarming. He was his comments were all reasonable comments.
Yeah, he should be. I mean, he should just be more out there. And I'm just wondering, maybe he is, and the media is not focusing on him or something.
On this round of the trial the trial itself, he hasn't been. I don't think. Well, he was in the very first day of the testimony, but there hasn't been anything as far as the media coverage on him. Back in 2017 when this happened, the father and the dad, or the fiance, Don, and her dad were in all of the articles in the stories. Very heavy presence from the father in Australia. And this is getting big news from Sydney as well. Sydney is very on their toes watching the response of this trial there in Australia.
Yeah. Do we know where Don Diamond, the fiance, where he was when this happened?
Not sure. I don't have it off the top of my head. I think he was in the U.S. He's traveling, but he was in the U.S. But I do believe he was in the country.
And was the son there too? Because the son lived with them, right?
I am not sure.
Zach. Yeah, the son's name is Zach Diamond. I watched a short video on him, and I have some questions about him. But
so the real question is, and those are all good questions. But what we don't hear in the trial, probably won't, is whatever happened to the sexual assault or the rape case. Who was the victim?
Yeah.
And whatever happened. And that's the real shame of this whole story, is someone who made a 911 call trying to help gets killed. And if there was a rape or a sexual assault going on behind in the same vicinity, that person will probably never come forward now. But something was going on.
Well, that person should, definitely. But
it'd be nice to get that person to come forward. And it was a female. I'm assuming it was a female who was making the no comments and the screams that were coming from behind. And so that's what's missed in all of this. We get someone dead, but yet we don't.
She was in meditation.
Yes, life coach, meditation, and
you know what type of meditation? Any connection to brainwashing or anything like that?
No.
Okay. No drug, nothing found in her system, no drugs or anything like that?
No. They were very healthy and athletic and kept in shape and exercised.
I'm baffled by this. Really, the smoking gun is just, why does a cop who's sitting in the passenger seat shoot past the driver? There had to have been something. Maybe he was on something. I don't know. It just does not make sense.
It certainly should not be something that takes 2 years to figure out.
No.
Should have had the answer the very next day. Could have cleared all this up. But I think they were all thinking of legal consequences of their actions. And everyone clammed up, and now we're sitting here 2 years later at a large trial. We still don't know what really happened.
Yeah, I would look at pressure of this program, and the person who told Noor to not say anything, was that guy involved in this program when it was created? Because you said the program's only about 5 years old.
And I do believe since this took place, that program has since shut down, and I think it was tabled, and now it's probably even shut down altogether. So.
Good.
All right, last case. Let's see if you've heard anything here on this case out in California. Mr. Irwin Jacobs, his wife, age 77, Alexandra. He was 77 also, found dead in their home on a 32-acre estate off Lake Minnetonka. Irwin Jacobs was a flamboyant businessman. Who was a part minority owner of the Minnesota Vikings at one point. Was in and out of the news, Forbes, Fortune magazine, for buying and selling companies. He was called Irv the Liquidator. Would buy struggling companies, buy the inventory, turn the companies around, and then resell them for a profit. And that was the business that he was in during this 70s, 80s, and 90s. A lot of times he was in the news, in magazines, had a flamboyant personality, had a big estate on this prime piece of real estate. The house was valued at $22 million estate, second highest at the time when it went on the market for sale in the entire state of Minnesota. So very high end, 5 kids, all raised off on their own and having kids, I think, themselves. So empty nesters. The story or the narrative was that the wife, shown here on this slide I'm showing, was suffering some problems with health issues. I think had recently fallen, had problems with her hip or pelvis or something. She was confined to a wheelchair. Some have alleged that she was having problems with dementia. He was getting up there in age also, and the word is that he was distressed potentially about her failing health, decided to shoot her in the bedroom, shot himself, and the bodies were found 8:30 in the morning by a friend who looked after the home. And so the question here is, 3 days before, I did a video on this as well. I'll link in the comments section below. He was in good spirits. And so why would someone in good spirits do this? Was there a suicide note? Haven't heard, haven't seen. All I know from the police reports is that they have found a gun at the scene and assumed that he killed his wife and then himself. Now, the autopsies are complete by the medical examiners, and both came back with both individuals suffered multiple, keyword, multiple gunshot wounds. So if he didn't indeed shoot her, that would make sense. She would make sense that she'd have one or more multiple gunshots. But if he was committed of a suicide, convicted essentially here, it was proved that he shot himself. Why or how could he shoot himself more than one time? It kind of brings back the old Gary Webb story from California. After his suicide, after finding himself shot twice in the face, twice in the head, after exposing the Iran-Contra affair in South Central LA. He was the person reporting on that. So, Irwin Jacobs, is there a conspiracy here? Probably not. I doubt it. But did he kill his wife and then himself? I'm thinking probably not. But sitting on a land of that value in the businesses that he was in for many years, that portion of that land near his house was in a redevelopment area. Developers were developing and selling that off in subdivisions or sublots there on that high-priced area of that lake. He put his house up for sale at way overpriced from what it should have been, and then just didn't budge. His house was listed at $22 million. I think comparatively, his land and property could have sold somewhere in the market of $15 to $18 million, and that would have been high. So, if developers are looking to develop and parcel out that land and make a nifty profit from it, it wasn't going to happen anytime soon because Mr. Irwin Jacobs here and his wife, like I say, were in the business of being businessmen and very stubborn at the same time, and wasn't interested in probably reducing that price and or selling. So that would easily be a motive. There's 5 kids in the family with a lot to inherit. There's going to be a motive right there, and who knows about anything else. But the strange thing with this one, Greg, is the police chief in the town of Orono, where the family was found, came out the very next day and said, I believe that this is a murder/suicide. We're not looking at suspects, and the public is not in any danger. That, to me, spoke more volumes, that comment, than anything else. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to go back. Did you say he was shot twice?
Yeah, he suffered multiple gunshot wounds.
How is that possible if he killed him? It's not possible if he killed himself.
I agree with you.
I'm looking at every article that I'm seeing, all the mainstream articles. They're not talking. They don't say anything about him being shot twice. Where is that coming from?
Do a Google search on the medical examiners, and this is Hennepin County Medical Examiner.
Okay.
That performed the coroner.
Do we have that report, or is it just like a statement from them? What is it?
Let's see here. Not the actual report, but the articles that came out. So if today's the 15th, look at articles from the, I think it was the 13th or 14th. Not the first round of press releases, but look for release articles in the last 2 days from the medical examiner's report. It was confirmed that both suffered multiple gunshot wounds. Multiple.
Then it's not a murder-suicide.
Exactly.
It can't be.
Now, Greg, you're familiar with the Crowley case in Apple Valley, Minnesota.
Yeah.
That case was David and his wife Kamel and their daughter Rani. He was 29, she was 28, and the daughter was 5. That was also ruled a double murder followed by a suicide, and the coroners and the medical examiners was handled by the Hennepin County Coroner's Office, same as this case. And both, back then they ruled it too, that David killed his daughter, his wife, and then finally himself. But there's no evidence to prove that, In fact, he was missing his right hand. They couldn't find the bullet casing, and he was right-handed. And there was no signed suicide note of anything. So that was an odd case to begin with. That took place in Apple Valley back in 2015. This case is in Orono here in 2019, and the police chief, very similar to the Apple Valley police chief. After the Crowley case, I think the very next day, it was the comment that the public is not in danger. No suspects are being sought, and we're treating this as a murder-suicide. Do you know why a police chief would make a statement like that in 24 to 48 hours after a case like this?
It doesn't make sense either. Only to just kind of, because there was so much controversy and because of what he was doing, maybe that's why. But if you think about it, there's really no logical reason to.
But that's
do that so early.
But that's the David Crowley case, right?
Yes.
Yes. Now, Irwin Jacobs here was a businessman in the last three or four decades, in and out of business. Still had an active business that he was running, but was not involved in anything, that would have been.
That just seems, it just seems like that's their standard line. So maybe this kind of shows that it doesn't matter what. I mean, they said that. I know it's a different county, but with the child that was thrown over the glass wall, they also said that too. That pretty much they're trying to make sure everybody knows that that the public is not in danger, right?
I think that's what they're saying, but in this case, as with the Crowley case, the public is in danger. Would be my supposition. The public is in danger. If this was not a suicide, if someone killed this family, that leads me to believe that the killer or killers are still out there. As with the David Crowley case, the evidence there's evidence to actually back up the fact that David Crowley could not have been the killer, and therefore, who did the killing? So the killer or killers in that Crowley case in Apple Valley are running loose. The killer or killers in the Jacobs family are out there.
I mean, how could anybody think anything different in this Jacobs case? Because you have the coroner or the medical examiner apparently saying both died of multiple gunshot wounds.
Now we don't know. Where the gunshot wounds are, but the fact that there's multiple, I have a hard time believing that. But here in the Twin Cities, here among family, friends, and co-workers and comments I read on the news articles, everyone believes it. They all believe it because that's what the coroner said.
Do they know that they're claiming he shot himself twice?
Yes, that's what's coming out after. That's what's coming out after the fact. Now, at first we believed it because I believed it myself. I said certainly it could have happened. Yeah. Now you get two bodies laying in a bed, 8:30 in the morning, and a gun laying between them. Of course, if I was the police chief or if I was the investigator on this case, I would more than likely treat it as a murder-suicide because it's obviously what it looks like and what it appears to be. You could start maybe treating it that way, but you certainly cannot make statements and factual statements on the record that this is what happened until the investigation is complete. Now, this case, the investigation is not complete. My question is, why is the police chief making comments like this in an open investigation? And that's not an answer for you, Greg, per se, but my question is just for the general public. Why is he saying anything? Why wouldn't he be saying we're investigating this, and when it's investigated and when it's done, we will have a report as to what happened? That's because certainly not what's being said.
Yeah, because that's like a cliffhanger, and they don't want to leave you with the cliffhanger. They want to give you something to make the case kind of die down.
Well, that
would definitely.
But that's not their job, right?
Sure.
So if your job in the police department is to protect and to serve the public, are you protecting and serving the public by saying that there's no one on the loose, there's no suspects, and this is a murder-suicide? You're not doing either of those things. Correct. And so that's now my point. Now, if you're lying to the public, are you doing your job. Of course, it's going to feel warm, fuzzy, good feeling to tell the public that they're not in danger. And more than likely, the public is not in danger. Okay?
Right. He's
but
probably a target, from what I can see.
It looks to me like he's a target. So now you're... I saw a case already on Twitter where they're treating Irwin Jacobs now as a domestic violence abuser.
Oh, here we go.
So they're playing the angle that violence. Now there's another angle on this, Greg. I'm not sure if it's in the newspapers or the press. Is that some say that this could also have been an assisted suicide. She was feeling so down in the dumps about her life and her medical condition, and so did he, that they both came to an agreement to do this together, or sort of as a, what's the word, complicit, as a pact, almost as a pact theory.
Oh, God. The pact, okay.
So we can't rule that out either.
Sure.
But police are saying that he did it, killed her and killed himself. Now, if
they need to be pressured to explain how he kills himself with 2 shots. They really need to be we're gonna put some pressure on them for that one.
Well, that's very interesting, because I would think that because they came to their conclusion, there's probably more evidence there in the house, whether it's a note, a suicide note, or something describing this for them to come to their conclusion.
And they haven't mentioned a suicide
nope,
note.
Nothing.
Correct?
Nothing's been mentioned.
Do they have a motive?
Motive, no. Now, the person who gave the motive is a friend that lives out of state that says that he was despondent and distressed about his wife's medical condition. So therefore, it must have been a murder-suicide.
Oh, there you go. It's open and shut.
But this is a friend from another state.
Well, he's still a friend, so that's all you need. I mean,
so how are we as a society closing the book on a police investigation based on what a friend says out of state? This is where it gets to be comical, Greg.
Yeah, I know.
This is where it gets to be where I can't even fathom a concept like this. The investigation's not done. We already have the answer. Medical examiner comes up with a bogus, and I'm going to call it that, a bogus situation for Irwin, as they ruled it for sure a suicide. I don't get if it was a pact, why he would shoot her twice. If he was angry with her, why would he shoot her twice? If he wanted to put her out of her misery, why would he shoot her twice? If he's going to kill himself, why would he shoot himself twice? Now that's me just using common sense, critical thinking. Neither should have suffered multiple gunshot wounds, correct?
Yes. Correct.
So we've got a problem altogether. We got a problem here. Now, of course, a pistol, handgun laying on the bed between the two bodies. Yes, if someone was to come in and kill these two individuals and leave a gun there, of course that's what it's going to look like. But you as an investigator have got to rule out the easy stuff. You can't just assume that what you see is what it is when you're dealing with multi-million-dollar individuals here, with hundreds of $1 million at stake in a case like this, whether it's the heirs or the ancestors or the estate coming down from the family members. You got to look at who's going to win, who's going to benefit, and who's going to come out ahead in a case like this. How quickly is that house going to be sold? Will it be turned into a subdivision? But what we have a situation here is, if I was to give you a scenario, Greg, of someone coming in to do this, regardless of the motive, you've got a woman who's in a wheelchair, and you've got a man who's 77 years old. Neither would be much of a neither would put up much of a fight. I'll say that. So if you were to come in and execute these two individuals, they may have still been in bed for all we know. We know that they were found on their bed. They were found on their bed. It doesn't say they're in their bed, but on their bed. And it was early in the morning, so when they were found. But we also don't know how long the bodies were there. It's not like they said the bodies were there in a decomposing, status, or 5 hours of rigor mortis, or what length of time they were there before the bodies were discovered.
We need those report. We need the medical examiner report on that or anything. I'm gonna try to look into some of this if I can.
It's an interesting case, and it's really these two were very active, did a lot in the society, did a lot for the community, and were very talented.
They did a lot for Special Olympics.
Special Olympics, special needs. Yep.
Which kind of ties into Trump, because back just a couple weeks ago, was it January, February, March 29th, 2019, Trump was talking about, I guess there was some pushback on the Special Olympics not being funded, and Trump made it clear that they will be funded. And if this guy was a big part of the Special Olympics, I've been looking for any ties between that. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah, and others have I've seen comments in other sections too, as if these were folks that were for or against. Were they Hillary fans? Were they anti-Hillary? Were they Clintons? Were they Trump supporters? Were they not? We do know that I think that Irwin Jacobs himself was a big donor in a lot of philanthropic things. His name did
on the chair of the Special Olympics.
Yeah, and his name did appear on that list in the David Crowley home that was found of the largest Minnesota contributors to the DNC. Irwin Jacobs' name was on that list. He donated a lot.
And that list is from 2009, correct?
I don't know.
You don't know? Yeah, I'm not sure what the date, because it's not really dated. It's just like the top 100 donors.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
And regardless of the year, it could be that, but Jacobs himself would have donated for all of those years, probably heavy amounts.
That is a lot of money. And he was also a part of the Minnesota Center for Arts, right? The Minnetonka Center for Arts.
Yeah, she was for sure.
She was, okay.
Yeah, she did artwork or work there. But
was that the same place that a Gray State was shown at? Or
close. That was the Walker. That was the Walker Art Center. Okay. Yeah, the documentary A Gray State did premiere there at the Walker Art Center for that on the Crowley case.
Well, I think the smoking gun here is the 2 shots to each person. That doesn't add up.
Yeah, until we find out where those shots were, I would say this. It's very suspicious. I would say, with someone of this caliber, of this nature, and of this stature, gets just suddenly found dead in their home. You'd have to investigate all the way to the end to see what forensics results, ballistics. Nothing should have been back. Nothing should be back yet.
Right. I mean, it should not be 2 shots to the head for Jacobs. If it's a shot, maybe he tried to shoot himself in the heart at first, it failed, and then he shot himself in the head or something. But otherwise, I don't understand how they can say that they both died from multiple gunshot wounds, yet it's a murder-suicide. I think I'm surprised that hasn't raised many more questions, and I think it's just because there's so much other things in your crazy state that's going on, pretty much.
Correct. There's too much. We can't keep up with all the stories. And so yeah, go ahead.
The only other thing I had on this one was about the 5. You said they have 5 kids.
Yes.
Were any of them in the area at this time, or do we know anything? Have any of them come out, asked any questions? If they should be the ones who are kind of leading this and say, hey, wait a minute, there's something wrong here.
Nope, they're not. And the only thing that I've read is the family has put together a press release to say that they were it was just a tragic. They were mourning. It was a tragic death, and that was it. And we'd like this time to be spent in private. Yeah. That's what we're getting. That's more of a uniform approach. But the one son was the one who made the comment that heard, I think, directly from the friend, the older friend that made the comment to the press release, as far as it was probably relating to her onset of dementia, and then he was down and depressed and just distraught, and that's probably what happened. There was one of the sons that was involved with the communication between all that. But that's all we haven't we haven't seen any pushback. We haven't seen anyone challenging the story. And it certainly could. Now, it certainly could be the case. It certainly could be all authentic and up to date. An actual, just an organic murder suicide. I'm just saying, and what I'm trying to get out to the public on the broadcast here is just to have individuals just open their minds, think outside the box, use your critical thinking, because something like this, when it doesn't make sense, your gut instinct is usually right. And when something's telling you that this does not add up, I'm not here to push a conspiracy per se, as certainly it could be, but I would still look for in a case like this, means, motive, and opportunity. Who benefits? Who benefits when these two, once again, it goes right to the heirs, because there's no surviving, doesn't go to the wife. Estate doesn't go to the husband. They're both out of the picture, so it goes directly now to the children. And so who stands to gain? The children. And I would say that these the folks interested in the development of the land that were stuck without any progress, as he was not going to be lowering that price or doing anything with the house, and the neighboring lots have all been built up and sold and developed in a very high exclusive area of Minnesota. There's lots of undercurrents to this case, as far as I know. Back to the Crowley case, to give folks on the outside listening to this case here, the Facebook page Justice for David Crowley and Family. There has been a private investigator hired, and he is currently doing his work. He's in his third month of work. There is a GoFundMe page to help offset some of the cost of that private investigator, but hopefully when that gets to a closure, this case, from 2015, this is a 4-year-old case that's essentially a triple homicide that's been unsolved for four years now. And so hopefully in the next probably 4 to 5 to 6 months, we will get an answer on that. And then once that case is done and once that report is completed, the private investigator says that we are free to take that to the media, take that to law enforcement, take that wherever we want. So that will be a very public case here coming up in the latter half of this year.
That's great.
All right.
How can people donate to that, or how can they get involved with the Crowley case?
I would say the Crowley case is the most active of the ones that I'm following here. We've got 2,600 members on that page on Justice for David Crowley and Family on Facebook, and the GoFundMe is a link is on that page as well, and then they can more than likely join or become a member of that page. They can donate to help defray the cost at the GoFundMe page, or if they're on Twitter, they can use the hashtag Justice for Crowleys. And I think there's even possibly an Instagram page now as well. I'm not sure, but there's some activity out there for people to get involved with that case as well. That's also, once again, another Minnesota case. We can almost stay full time on the Minnesota angle with these cases, and they're just, once again, they're just strange. They're just strange situations of what they are. But just trying to get people. Hopefully, you leave your comments and everything behind here. Comments with any questions. And I'm going to find that page here for the Crowley case. It's called the www.gofundme.com, and it looks like it's called Crowley Case Investigation Investigator Hired. And so there's links. I'll put a link there on this page as well of the fundraising efforts for that, and I'll put a link to the Facebook group also. What I didn't find is relating to this Jacobs case, because it's so new. I don't know if there's anything out there, but I haven't seen anything as far as a Justice for the Family type of a page or a group that's out there. There certainly could be one, but Anyway, I will post some links here below, but I would like to thanks, Greg. Do you have anything in the closing minutes here about the child thrown overboard, the Officer Noor case, the Ilhan Omar case, or the Irwin Jacobs case?
I would just say I hope everybody, if you have time to research these cases, please do. That's it.
Yeah, very interesting, and we're looking forward to comments below as well. I'll leave the links to the various items and the cases in the description area of this video. Thanks again, Greg. Thanks for your time. Today is April 15th, 2019. This is called Minnesota in the News. For Greg Fernandez Jr., this is Dan Hennen saying thanks for listening.